It's 2 o'clock. All right, I'm Doug Hunt. I'm chair of the Board of Commissioners of Lincoln County, and it's really my privilege to be able to be here today and to introduce our moderator. I'd like to take a moment to thank all of you that have shown up. We have citizens, we have representatives from state, regional, and local jurisdictions, and this is an important issue. As I thought about how to characterize this gathering, I thought, well, this is the first step in a long journey. This is a challenge that we all face, and I really got to thinking that this meeting really represents the canary in the coal mine. This is the meeting where we start a conversation about biosolids, but to me, biosolids is only the start. Really, the issues that we need to look at really involve water quality, the watershed in the Siletz River. Again, I think this is a first step in a journey, and I'll make a special thank you to the individuals, I see most of them in the front row, that first came to a Board of Commissioners meeting and started to ask some questions. So we have a lot of questions today. There'll be a lot of information. I was talking with somebody earlier, and it's kind of a case of you don't know what you don't know until you know it. So I think there's a lot for us to learn today. And after the meeting, we'll have an opportunity to talk about what our next steps are. So with that, it's my privilege to introduce Jamie Damon. Jamie is here as a moderator, but she's also working with me on the Maritime Task Force that the governor has appointed. And very briefly, since 1986, Jamie has worked as a mediator and a facilitator with individuals, citizen groups, and local, state, and federal government agencies to guide individuals and groups through controversial and highly contentious situations. So I think you'll agree. She has some great credentials. It's my privilege to turn the meeting over to Jamie Damon. Welcome.
Great, thank you. Well, welcome. Looks like we have a full house. I hope people were able to pick up a copy of the agenda that was in the back of the room. And from what I understand, we're gathered here until about 4, maybe a little after. We've organized the agenda in really 2 parts. The first part is information out. So we have a series of panels that you'll see on here that represent different perspectives about the issue of biosolids. And it's really about sharing information. The second half is all about hearing from you. And so we've got some comment cards. We've got a number of them up here. There are others. Where are the comment cards located at? Can somebody hold up the stack? Are they just on the back table?
Yeah, they're on the back table, Jimmy. Okay,
so there's comment cards. We'll do our best to hear from as many of you as possible, and I'll give a few parameters when we get to that point about how much time we have. But really, if you don't get a chance to speak, or even if you're just noodling through listening to the conversations from the panelists, I really urge you to grab a comment card, take some notes about something that piques your interest, something you want more information about, a question, a comment that you have, because we're going to collect all of these, and Lincoln County is going to do the best they can, along with state agencies and local organizations, to answer these questions. As the chair said, this is the start of the conversation. So, and the purpose of today's meeting really is to share information among all of us. So just a couple of ground rules. The first is silence your phones, please. So if you haven't already done it, and I will make sure that mine is silenced as well. The second is, if you do want to have side conversations, if you could take those out of the room, that would be terrific. The third is to let you know that, from what I understand, Wayne,
yes,
this is being taped and being shown live. Okay.
It's being live stream right now, Jamie.
Live stream right now, so I want to make sure everybody knows that. And another is to please hold your questions and comments to the question and comment period, because we have, as you can see on the agenda, we have a number of panels to get through. They're all organized around 12 minutes apiece. I'll be doing my best along with them to help them stay to their time so we can hear all of the information they have to share. And so if you could hold your questions and comments to the second half of the meeting, that would really help us to get through all the information. And the third is, we're a diverse group of folks here. We're going to hear a wide range of opinions, and to listen as respectfully as you can so that we can benefit from the information that's shared today. So those are all the ground rules and kind of starting things that I had to offer. So with that, oh, there is one more. We do have a number of elected officials in the audience, and I think it would be helpful if you could stand and introduce yourselves so that we know that you're here.
Arnie Roman, State Senator, District 5, which goes from Goose Bay to Philadelphia Bay. And if you have questions directly to us, let us know afterward. Meredith is here with our postal office, and she can take notes and get back to you.
Thank you. David Gomberg, State Representative from the Central Coast, and my Chief of Staff, Tyler, is over on the other side of the room.
Terry Thompson, Lincoln County Commissioner.
Claire Hall, Lincoln County Commissioner.
Any other elected officials I have missed? Yes.
Billy Joe Smith, Mayor Toledo.
Welcome. And from what I understand, our elected officials are here today to listen as well. We may, at the last half of the meeting, when we're talking about next steps and wrap up, we may turn to them for them to offer any observations or reflections that they have based on what they've heard.
Jake, we got a few more.
Oh. Who are we missing?
Susan Waukee, Lincoln City Council.
Welcome.
Dick Anderson, City Council, Lincoln City.
Okay.
Judy Casper, Lincoln City Council.
Welcome. Anybody else? Going once? Going twice? Tribal council? Yeah. Please.
Lily Butler, Tribal Council, Confederate Tribes of Selects.
Welcome.
Lorraine Butler, Selects Tribal Council.
Welcome. All right. Last call for elected officials. All right, let's go ahead and get this meeting started. So we have a number of panels. The first panel up is Save Our Selects River. And I think we have folks sitting right here in the front. So for panelists, I have a number one here. That's the 1 minute warning to wrap up. So come on up and have a seat. And I'm not sure if you need me to help moderate between panels, or do you have something all between individual panelists? Do we help manage the time?
I
Or?
think that
Yeah, you want to do
somebody
that?
right
Okay.
in there. Well, wait a minute. Right.
Okay, so I'll just give you the 1 minute warning, 4 minutes each, and I'll be where you can see.
Okay, and now we had a slide.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why I could stand so you can see me. How about I just sit at the end of your table? Yeah.
Oh, I think they're not in the place.
I'll just click around so you can.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you speak loud, we don't have
Okay.
mics.
Hi, I'm Kayleen Davis. I am farmer. Graduated from Selects, know a lot of the farmers, friends, classmates, neighbors. I want to say we didn't want to do this. This is not something we ever wanted to do. But sometimes you got to do what you have to do. My husband and I, we own a farm along the Logston River. I grew up here at Cedar Creek, and we've worked hard to have a home where we wouldn't have to leave. We have the river, we have garden space, we have the forest. We've lived here for 31 years. We've raised our children here, our grandchildren. 6 of them have been to the river. 4 of them have not. They were going to go this year, at least 2 of them, but we can't take them because we don't know if it's safe. Have a great grandbaby, don't know if we're going to be able to take them. Seen some wonderful smiles on this river, and I don't know if we're going to see them off from our girls or grandkids again. About 20 years ago, they started hauling this, these trucks started coming. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. There they are. That's Mother's Day coming by Logston Church. They started, more and more of them started coming. They've been hauling up the upper Selects and the lower Selects. Millions of gallons have gone by, and we were told it was safe. For years we watched and asked and never really believed it. Then the morning came, that truck came around, it was right on the top of that school bus. Couldn't take it anymore. So we videoed them and put them on Facebook, and we started really delving into this, and we started finding the truth about this stuff, and how the results it would have on all the living creatures that depend on the river. The cities of Selects, Toledo, Newport, Seal Rock drink this water. And then there's the studies about the wild game, the livestock that eat this, sickening cancer-causing chemicals, and it's in the water. So we posted the video, and we became Save Our Siletz River when Celine allowed us. We didn't get her side. She just saw the first video and says, "I'm with you. We gotta stop this." So we posted we were going to the first commissioners meeting, and there waiting for us was Betty Kamikawa, our soil scientist. That's my husband. So after about 4 or 5 years, we started to notice this algae. And we noticed that the aquatic life was disappearing. The eels, they used to be thick, dead all over the place, kind of gave me the willies. They're not there. Bullheads, haven't seen one in a long time. There's a lot of in-water bugs. They're missing. And this algae, this horrible algae. You know, the crawdaddy started to go, the smolts have stopped getting less and less, the salmon are declining. Even the periwinkles are starting to go away. The periwinkles used to be thick. Toxic sewage sludge, millions of gallons have been sprayed on these fields. I was going to try and give you an idea, but I couldn't pull up the records quite to figure out the exact amount of gallons from the forms. But they've been, excuse me, on the fields here. This is Jeff Mansfield. They're not going to, there's Howard Wisecover's field with the shrimp and the church. And this is H2NOS that DEQ could not contact. Second day of the powwow to tell them, ask them to stop. We don't know if the testing was done. There's violations. There's no signs. There's lots of violations. But what we know from the DEQ that there's no monitoring at the local level. It's self-monitoring by the cities. Farmers' permits dating back to the 90s, and they look like this. Obvious violations. And the reporting records, incomplete, non-existent that I found. No environmental impact study was done. Nothing, it really did not look at the different ways of this to make it to the water. Main-Coast Basin has met and spent millions of dollars over the years, probably decades. And this is where we are now. And then found that EPA, Siletz River, pilot project. Siletz River, nutrients, effects of biosolids in the application. It's time for the test to be over. Common sense tells you, you don't put your drain field next to your well.
Hi, I stand up. I got bad back, knee surgery. First of all, my name's Alan Davis, as you know. Live in Logston. Ex-military, I was involved in top secret missions regarding nuclear weapons. These are my nuclear data card, my nuclear clearance, my missions that I was on. I got out of the military, went and got my aviation license. Didn't like it. Concerned about the chemicals, went to work in a woods. Spent almost 20 years up there. And all these watersheds, sleds, LC, learned it really well. Like my wife said, we cleaned our land out there, cleaned it, raised it, kept care of it, and the last several years watched everything start dying off. And so we started investigating. That's above Moonshine Park. As you can see, the water's clear, no algae really. The earth is 100% of our water, 97% of it's unusable. 3% is usable, 2% is frozen, 1% is what the human race relies on. And this is where we're dumping. See that? See where those trees are? The river's right down below. We're poisoning our kids and future generations. This is asinine. And we're looking to all your leaders, senators, everybody here. And the problem is they have these things called chlorofuranols, and it's microscopic plastics. They cannot be detected. They're in our waters. The EPA knows it. There's records of it. If you look at our outline, it's all in it. It's just too much to go into with only like 4 minutes. Okay. Some of the samples, this is from the EPA Microplastic Expert Workshop, Wetlands and Ocean Wetlands. It says microplastic source, sludge, land application, landfill, and leachate. That's EPA. The Federal Drug Administration says also
says flush all your medicines down after you're done with them. Some of them can be, like many drugs, can be absorbed, so they tell them flush them down into the bathroom, toilet, whatever. That all goes out. The USGA says wastewater treatment is effective in removing a portion of these chemicals from incoming waste. However, some chemicals are not removed, but instead absorb the biosolid materials. When biosolids are land applied as fertilized, the potential exists the chemicals could run off the land surface and into local waters. We also, on our outline, has 25 different chemicals found in 9 all biosolids studied. And it goes, there's antihistamines, fragrancy, detergents, fire retardants. It goes on and on. That's also in our outline, so if you need to look at that.
Hey, Alan.
Yes. The second our last one, I guess, is contaminated list. It's called Contaminated Cadet List by the EPA. It says known or anticipated and occur in our public water systems. They already know it's there. It includes 97 different chemical groups, 12 microbial contaminants. The list includes many other chemicals, pesticides, biological toxins, disinfectants, pharmaceuticals, and waterborne pathogens. This is all by the EPA. They know this stuff's in here. And here's some water here if any of you guys from the EPA or DEQ want to drink it. This is right out of the slush room. This is what it needs to be tested. And the last, since we're pressed for time, we need to have testing, water testing, biological testing, soil testing, medical health studies, and we stand by with Confederated Tribes for everything they've wrote a letter to the governor for. This river needs to be checked because we're destroying it. And if we lose this water for all Toledo, Newport, Sledge, Seal Rock, and everybody else that relies on it, as a human race around this place, we're gone. But that's it.
Thanks, Ellen. Betty?
Hi, I'm Betty Kamikawa. I have a degree in agronomy from the University of Illinois. Agronomy is soil and crop science, for those of you who don't know. I worked for 11 years in the soil testing industry as a supervisor in 3 different labs in 3 different states. In the 80s, the lab I worked at tested sludge, and that was when it began to be applied. Then the problems were heavy metals. It's way more complicated than that now. We've done a pretty good job of getting a handle on the heavy metals in our biosolids. That's not what we're here about. We're here about all the pharmaceuticals we take into our bodies, all the things we wash down the drain, our cosmetics, our laundry detergents, our the flame retardants from our clothing, the polyester you wear, the polar fleece, it's all made of plastic. That's where the plastics are coming from, folks. Every time you wash them, a little bit more gets washed down the drains. And when they make them, it gets washed down the drains. So that's what we're here about, is all that stuff that nobody tests for. And they don't test for it because it's expensive. And the latest EPA report that came out this past May has over 10 pages of compounds that could be in our water, and that could be in the biosolids. It's a biosolids study that they did, and it can be in our biosolids. Personally, I don't want to drink somebody else's antihistamines, somebody's meth. I don't want that. I don't want that stuff in my drinking water. If it's not naturally occurring, I don't want it in my water. So, the things I want to talk about is enforcement of the regulations. Who is enforcing the regulations? We don't see it. We just don't see it happening. And when there's a non-compliance issue, what are the penalties? We can't find anything that says what a penalty is for non-compliance. Just go out and apply whatever you want, wherever you want. That can't, there are regulations, there are laws, and they're not following them that we can see. So, and then I have a list of things that we would like to see happen. This group would like to see happen. We would like a 5-year moratorium on biosolids until they are properly studied. We don't know what's in them. We don't know what they're doing to us. We don't want it applied anymore. We would like the county to have control of the watershed. We need local control. Right now, DEQ's in charge, and there's one person for the whole area. It's a huge area, and he can't possibly cover it all. So we would like to see the county have more control on that. It's our watershed. We need to have a say in what's going on there.
Betty, 1 minute.
Okay. Thank you. We'd like to see some funding for testing of wells, rivers and streams, and the sediment as well as the water. We'd like to see some funding for pilot projects on the new technology, pyrolysis, biochar, and gasification, to name a few. There's a lot of different things going on in different areas, and we can take that and use it. And then we'd also like to see a regional waste disposal plant that we can all, that instead of individual cities doing individual things, make it regional, build the plant, and everybody brings their waste there, and then that gets taken care of from there. So, I mean, we can keep doing what we're doing and take the risk of these farms becoming Superfund sites. We don't know, and we don't want to see that happen. We don't want to see anybody sick, and we don't want to see any more of the health problems that we're seeing.
Thank you, Betty. Were you going to say a few comments?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's go.
I'm Celine Relatos, and I'm, like Keelan said, I've seen on social media the video, and that's how I got involved. But I also want to recognize some people that were whistleblowers years ago, and the gentleman in front, and Margaret just showed me pictures from 2015 to today. Oh my goodness, she's going to show them to you later. I mean, yeah, we need everything what this group has said, and I'm glad to be a part of this. When we talk about the Siletz River, it's a crooked river, and I grew up on the Siletz River, and from a tribal standpoint, we call it the upper farm and the lower farm, and I'm really happy there are tribal council members here today. I don't represent my tribe, I represent my family, myself, and this group. I just want to read this petition that this group, we went out and got a lot of names. This is not accurate. It says 263 on the social media, and then there's more. We just haven't had time to count them all because we're all busy with other things in our lives as well. And this is what the petition says. Some of you have signed it. Save our Siletz River, stop spreading toxic sewage, sludge, biosolids, everyone, regardless of where you live, who care for the Siletz River. Please sign. The Siletz River is dying. That means we are slowly dying. We depend on the Siletz for the water we drink, the air we breathe, the fish and wildlife that are such an essential part of this land that we love. All are being poisoned without our consent. This is happening in many ways, including the spreading of toxic sewage sludge on our soil, often very close to the river. We the people have the power to stop this. We demand an immediate halt to the application of toxic sludge biosolids to any soil within the Siletz watershed and on any other soil in Lincoln County. There are better, less expensive, and far less harmful ways to dispose of this waste, and we demand that our local representatives who have the power to change this do so now. You know, I grew up fishing. I grew up with my grandfather, who was born in 1900. He said, Archie Ben, the chief of our tribe, you could walk across and you see nothing but silver. A lot of you are fishermen here. You know what I'm saying. And then when you go, we've seen a few boats coming up here today, and our river is dying, and we are very, very, very concerned. And I know you're all concerned too, because that's why you are here. And so we're just trying to educate everybody the best we can. I'm learning a lot myself, and like Doug said, what you don't know, you don't know. You know, my uncle was famous for saying that. What you don't know, you don't know. It's time we all get educated and to stop this, like Betty said, until we get some real testing done. And I appreciate seeing so many people here today.
Excellent. Thank you. That time goes by really fast. So, round of applause for
That's where it ends.
next.
state agencies. Department of Environmental Quality.
Renee.
Renee.
Close. Close.
It's not, that's a, I was saying that's a creative spelling.
It's
Paul.
close. Let me write, please.
So it is a nice one. So would you like me to help manage the time between panelists, or do you have it all organized together?
No, you will need your help.
Okay.
So, are we doing 12 minutes, so 4 minutes? 4 minutes for each of them?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just gonna introduce them really quickly.
Okay.
Okay, and myself too.
So my name is Renee Namura. I'm a water quality manager with DEQ's Western Region office. We oversee 12 counties from pretty much Yamhill County over to the coast and down to the California border. So with me today, I have Aaron Borisenko. Aaron manages the water quality monitoring section at DEQ's laboratory, and he is going to talk a little bit about the algal blooms and the hazardous nature of algal blooms and kind of give you an update on what DEQ is doing in that area. And then we have Pat Hines. Pat Hines is our state biosolids coordinator, and he'll give you an overview of how the federal and state regulations for biosolids at a higher level. And then Paul Kennedy, who a lot of you have met already, who is one of my inspectors, but he does deal primarily with biosolids, so he's our regional expert on biosolids.
All right, well, I appreciate the invitation to talk to you a little bit about harmful algae blooms today. I wanted to make clear what a harmful algae bloom really is. There are a couple of types of blooms out there. There's what are called green algae blooms, and so green algae are actually true algae forms that grow naturally. When we become concerned is when they grow beyond maybe what we would expect from a natural type of system. A harmful algae bloom is actually not algae at all, but it's truly cyanobacteria. And these are the first forms of life on Earth. They evolved 3.5 billion years ago in conditions that were much different than today. And we actually owe them a debt of gratitude in that they were the first oxygen-producing organisms on Earth. So all the organisms that came after cyanobacteria, all the oxygen-breathing animals came because of these cyanobacteria. The problem is when both the normal or healthy types of algae and the cyanobacteria grow explosively. And when they do, it can create problems for the things that we value, like fish, like recreational contact, like drinking water and things like that. So what we try to control are the things that we have control over, such as water temperature, such as nutrient loading, excess nutrients getting into our waterways, which can fertilize and essentially create favorable environments for both cyanobacteria and green algae. And we try to control flow. In some situations, if flow becomes too restricted or constrained, where it's really slow, stagnant moving situations, that can really create an environment that's favorable to these harmful algae blooms. So at DEQ, at our laboratory, we do testing both to inform where the problems might be. For example, last year in the Siletz watershed, we were working on water quality management planning around some of the parameters that are impaired, dissolved oxygen, for example, pH, and algae. Can all be impacted by nutrients, and so if we have low dissolved oxygen or elevated pH values, then we start to look inside these watersheds, measuring nutrients in the water, looking upstream to see where some of those sources are, and trying to figure out how to solve these problems through a management planning activity. We also test for the actual toxins that the cyanobacteria produce. So right now we're doing a lot of testing. You probably have heard of Salem's situation where they had a drinking water advisory for the entire month of June, and that got a lot of attention as to what's going on with other source water facilities around the state. So we're looking at 100 different facilities around the state right now, sampling them every 2 weeks to see if the raw water coming into those facilities has any of these cyanotoxins present. And so I see I'm running short on time, but I'd be happy to answer more questions about harmful algae blooms when we have time.
My name is Pat Hines. I'm the state coordinator for biosolids, and I'd like to address what are biosolids. Biosolids are produced by wastewater treatment facilities. It's the solids left over after treatment that settle out. Those solids then, before they can be land applied, have to go through additional treatment. That additional treatment is through, there's a number of processes such as anaerobic digestion, aerobic digestion, alkaline stabilization, et cetera. That additional treatment is to reduce pathogen potential, so that whatever, significantly reduce the volume of pathogens that might be present, as well as what we classify as volatile solids. Volatile solids are probably best described as the calorific value of that material. So what is the food value for pests or parasites or vectors, as we would classify them as? So your flies, your mosquitoes, your rodents, et cetera, and so forth. So we want to reduce that so that we're not attracting those parasites or those pests to that area prior to land application. We also have requirements as far as inorganics. The inorganics include heavy metals. So we have a requirement that that material is tested and sampled to make sure that it's not exceeding threshold levels for that. That's primarily addressed through pre-treatment. Pre-treatment is a process, a whole other program that addresses what gets discharged to the sanitary sewer system. And that's, I can go into a lot more detail on that as well, but I'm going to keep this short. How are they regulated? Actually, I'm sorry, let me back up here for a minute. Nutrients. Why do we land apply biosolids? Biosolids have a very high nitrogen content. They have a high potassium concentration. They also have phosphorus. They also have 16 of the primary constituents necessary for plant growth. They make an excellent fertilizer. They also provide organic carbon. They provide and facilitate the growth and development of the biotic community inside the soil. So it creates a beautiful soil structure. And is used as a soil amenitive for agricultural land that has gone through extensive harvesting. When you're harvesting, you're pulling those nutrients off the soil. That needs to be replenished. Otherwise, that soil essentially dries up and stops producing. So farmers need to continue to land apply some sort of fertilizer. So they have an option: chemical fertilizer, an artificial fertilizer, which typically is a fast release material. Fast release, it goes down, it's higher likelihood of leaching. Biosolids have a very slow leaching process, or a very slow release process because of the organic carbon that's present in there, as well as the makeup and structure of the material. And biosolids have an odor. I'll be straight up. Thank you. That's probably the biggest piece I find is people say it's the odor. And really the bottom line is the odor. And frequently that is caused by the process that it's developed, how it's made, as well as how it's treated. And different facilities have different odor content in their biosolids. Biosolids are regulated by both state and federal. We have state regulations as well as federal regulations. State regulations are more stringent than the federal regulations on this. I can go into more detail if there's other questions on that. Biosolids are also one of the most heavily studied soil amenitive that is available. EPA has done an extensive risk assessment on biosolids. Every 2 years, they reviewed biosolids regulations to see if the emerging contaminants of concern, the advances of science, have identified other contaminants of concern. Endocrine disruptors, PFAS, which are your fire retardants, microplastics. In fact, EPA is doing a study right now up in Tillamook on microplastics. So these are pieces that we continue to study. It's not something that we're turning our back to and ignoring. I can assure you, we are very cognizant of the concerns and what environmental as well as human health factors at land application of biosolids have.
Paul?
Good. A lot of you already know me. I'm a regional biosolids coordinator for the department. I've been out to these sites since well, 2014 and beyond. Been out many times, looked at the soils. Essentially, I want to start off with that the cities, since that time period, aren't generating more biosolids than they have in the past. So we're land applying the same amount of biosolids essentially as we have in the past. Biosolids are, for the farmer, it's like essential vitamin. It has all the plant essential nutrients. It has the organic carbon. So when you farm, like Pat was alluding to, you're pulling out these nutrients. The biosolids actually put back the nutrients that we mined out in a more complete and rounded way. You talked about being a slow-release fertilizer. It's called mineralization. The bugs get it first. That's what happens in soils. When you build a soil food web, what you do is you pour organic carbon down. The bugs eat up whatever it is they can. And I mean bugs like bacteria, but you have to start at the surface, and there's nematodes, arthropods. Those are the macro chewers. They do the heavy lifting. They break things up so the little bugs can come up to the surface and remove that, move it down to the plant roots. That's mineralization. It doesn't go with water. It goes with bugs. Depot Bay, they produce about 70 dry tons a year. Otter grass, they produce about 3 dry tons a year. Lincoln City, when they were land applying, it varied. It could be as much as 150 dry tons a year. So they land apply every 10 to 15 years. They have facultative storage balloons on the back of their SPRs, so they can source all this. But they land applied back in 2009. They'll be land applying here in the near future, adjacent to the plant on Doña High's property. Toledo, they produce about 30 dry tons a year. So a lot of these cities have acreage, and they supply organic biosolids, if you will, to the farmers. They don't typically use all the acreage that the farmer has, and they don't typically put on the amount of nitrogen that we authorize based on the OSU fertilizer guides. When I go out and do a soil assessment, my background is soils. I look at these soils, I look at the nutrient holding capacity, and I base it on the low end of the fertilizer guide for OSU. So they'll recommend 100 pounds of plant available nitrogen. Plant available nitrogen is the amount of nitrogen the plant will take up in the growing season. Okay, you'll put on 130 pounds, but only about 100 of it will be available. That other 30 pounds is going to mineralize the next couple of years. It'll carry over because the bugs can't break it down that readily. So some of this is going to turn into what we call humic and fulvic acids. It's going to turn into soil organic matter. And that is really one of the optimal things to me as a soil scientist and as to the farmers, because you're building soil organic matter. You're building a surface area for the substrate for bugs and nutrient cycling. Okay.
He could go on for hours.
Walport and Yachts are in the same county as yourselves, but they're different water systems. They also produce and land apply biosolids in farmlands. And so there's farmers in the other parts of the county that are dependent on this biosolids in lieu of a commercial fertilizer.
Did you mention Newport?
I did not. But Newport, they produce about 500 dry tons. And the key about Newport is they do a thermal, it's an alkaline pressurized system. They produce a Class A biosolids. It's dewatered, so it's a cake. So they have two benefits. They have lime and they have biosolids. And when you land apply lime, I was talking to farmers this morning, some of the soil pHs are down at 4 or 5. That's too low for grass. It needs to be about 5.5. That's optimal. If you talk to Dan Sullivan with OSU, he'll talk to you about grass and nutrient cycling and biosolids. And it's unfortunate Dan wasn't here today. He couldn't be, but he's done a lot of research on soils, on phosphorus, on biosolids. And I guess the bottom line is that Newport's is a Class A, we don't track it, it's like a manure. So they can go out and land apply on their own property, they have about 150 acres that they do around the airport, and they have farmers to the south of town that they land apply on.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Don't ask him another question. Sorry. My bad.
All right, thank you. Next up, if you want to go ahead and take your cards. Next up, we have local operators. It's a lot of information to take in. So, yeah, Andrew, Matt, and Dan, and Gary. Is that right? Andrew, Matt, Dan, you must be Gary. Gary.
City of People Bay.
People Bay. So, do you need me to help you moderate between panelists, or do you have it organized all together?
Speak.
No, yes, if you want to take the lead on that, it's wet right over.
So, Andrew, you're going to take the lead for the group? So, you're taking all 12 minutes?
No, for a couple.
Okay. Do you need something to wipe that water up?
Yeah, there's been a
A little spill.
non-hazardous spill.
Thank you.
Clean up on aisle 1. There we go. That way you don't get your materials all
Thank you,
wet.
appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay, ready?
Ready? Yep.
Hi, my name's Andrew Grant. I'm the wastewater treatment plant supervisor for the city of Newport. We have several panelists of the larger biosolids generators in the county. And first off, welcome the elected officials, the fellow panelists, the tribal members, and the members of the public. Talk to you a little bit about biosolids, how we create them, what the status of the program is in Newport and in Lincoln County, and basically just round out the picture of why we're here and what we do. So the first order of business for a wastewater treatment plant is to protect public health. We protect public health because without wastewater treatment, we have plague, we have cholera, dysentery. We are all about risk mitigation and not elimination. So we, in Newport, we're able to transform pathogenic material and export to non-pathogenic products. Clean water, clean effluent, and biosolids, which are pasteurized in Newport. A plant like Lincoln City has a UV disinfection system. They don't discharge any active organisms out of their effluent stream. Newport doesn't do that. We use chlorine, but it's about risk mitigation, not elimination. And the reason we do that is financially, it's not technologically feasible to do lots of things. It's important to say that wastewater treatment plants are the last line in pollution prevention. If it gets past us, it's in the environment. And we have source control measures like pre-treatment programs, but our job is to stop this stuff from getting out in the environment. So, all of us, we have over 50 years of water quality experience. We don't clean water in one place to go dirty it somewhere else. So it's a mischaracterization to say that we would dump biosolids in a facility upstream of a town. We are water quality protectors. This is what we do. This is the number 2 goal in wastewater treatment. As DEQ just said, the nutrients within biosolids, the reason we remove them from the water column, from the wastewater stream, is because they do generate algal blooms. We understand that because, again, that's our secondary goal, is protecting water quality. We don't apply biosolids to a field, again, as Paul said, above an agronomic loading rate. That's the rate at which the plants can absorb the nutrients for that growing season. And we've gone beyond the required testing from DEQ to make sure that we aren't meeting the agronomic loading rate. Newport and Toledo, we're testing our fields every year to see what that mineralization rate is, make sure we don't have carryover from year to year. And the reason we do that is to provide the most benefit to the farmer, so I can say to the farmer, I'm meeting your nutrient needs for this year, and also to protect the environment. We test soils at 1, 2, and 3 feet to make sure there's no bleed through of nutrients. So we're very confident in our data and our testing. I'm literally the person who does the testing. We've denied sites within the Siletz Valley that we could have applied to legally because they had too much phosphorus in the soil, right? Phosphorus is often limiting nutrient in freshwater ecosystems.
We're uncomfortable doing that, even though we're legally able to do so. So we've denied sites. We have an application process. We want to provide the least risk to the environment. Again, it's risk mitigation, not elimination. So, acting as rational actors, all of our cities have developed their own strategies for biosolids production. And they built out the infrastructure to do so. So Newport is a very different plant than Depot Bay, than Lincoln City. And you saw that in the volumes we produce. So Newport, we have a lime stabilization system, and we pasteurize the biosolids. They're completely dead when we apply them. And it's an expensive system, right? We've chosen that path for Newport. We have a fairly new plant. It was built in 2002. Toledo has a cannibal system where they're recycling nutrients within the plant, and they generate a lot. The volume of biosolids is a lot less because they're able to utilize the nutrients to grow organisms within the plant. Lincoln City, is what works for Lincoln City, and their operations are dewatering sludge and going to the landfill. They've costed that out. They don't want to invest in a large infrastructure. It was what works for Lincoln City. Depot Bay, they have a city-owned plant and a city operator, but they've contracted out the hauling of Class B biosolids. They don't have the infrastructure of Newport, they don't have a truck, they don't have the labor to drive it. And Otter Rock, they have a tiny plant, they operate 2 hours a day for an operator. They can't afford a full-time operator, so they contract out the operations and the land application. And why is this important? Because we're supposed to here to look at alternatives to biosolids applications. So, Class A biosolids. Newport is the biggest city. We generate the most biosolids because of our process and because of our service area. There's an economy of scale to going to Class A. We have this big generation. We can build out this big facility. We did it at facilities planning time in 1999. We decided this is the way it was going to go, and it all priced out. For Depot Bay to go build a Class A facility is going to be very costly. They already have the sunk infrastructure in what they do. Landfilling, for Newport, it might not cost out. Landfilling is actually more expensive than producing a Class A product. And we have this infrastructure that we've built out and used. So we can produce it cheaper than Lincoln City can throw it away. And it's not beneficial reuse, right? We're negating all this nutrient value, all this nutrient recycling we can do. Regional facility, I feel like this comes up a lot. And there are some barriers to that. Different plants have different waste streams. So like I said, Matt's plant in Toledo, they have a cannibal system. The characteristics of their sludge, he can't deliver it to me and I can't run it through my system, right? Anaerobic digesters, aerobic digesters, thickened sludges, non-thickened sludges. We all have different systems and we can't just combine them into a common facility. There's more than ways to skin a cat in wastewater. We all have different ways to get to Class A, Class B. Permits, we're all on different National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permits, and as part of that is a biosolids management plan. That's the rules of the road for a biosolids program. All of our permits are different. We can't just say we're all diverting into a common facility, and the last reason is intergovernmental agreements. So while I like Dan, and we get along great, our city councils might not decide that who's going to operate a regional facility, who's responsible for operations, maintenance, costs. And then we still have land application issues. If we go to a regional facility, where are we going to go with this stuff? That brings up, the NIMBY problem, shipping it somewhere else. So there's additional costs associated with shipping to the valley. There's financial costs, there's environmental costs, trucking across the mountains. And this is a product with local demand. This is a compact between a farmer and the city. We go through an application process. I visit these farmers. I talk to my farmers almost every week. We let them know every single load. We're in constant communication. And so how do we engender trust between the cities and the farmers? It's from the testing. We're testing their soils every year. We're able to talk about how many nutrients you're going to get and where the trucks are and loading and moving cows and things like that, harvesting hay. They can see the results. So, we get fantastic feedback from our farmers when they see that first application go down. They see the farm and they see the pH is coming up. We have soils that are at 4.5. And as we can get that top 2 inches to get an increase in pH, they start to see the grass root immediately. They don't have tansy problems. And transparency, I've sat down with most of my farmers, 3 out of 4, literally sat down at the kitchen table and said, what's going on in the paper? What do we hear about this? And we're in constant communication. We talk about it. We do have access to studies from NIH and from EPA and Oregon Association of Clean Water Agencies to talk about these emerging pollutants of concern and why, Newport doesn't have them. It's a nature of our product. So lastly, this is a direct quote from an unsolicited voicemail I got from a farmer. I appreciate everything you've done for me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Their fields were run down, overgrazed, you know, patch of grass here, a patch of grass there. We came through with biosolids. They got a nice rain, settled in, and they could immediately see the results, right? The grass came back, the bugs came back. They're seeing worms, right? There's bees in the field. We've regenerated their site, right? So there's a value here to the farmers. You know, I welcome any questions, and if anyone wants to sideline me, do you guys have anything you want to point out?
You've done a fairly good job of summing it up, but I would like to state that Depot Bay has been aware of this issue for several years, and we've had a program in place for about 18 months now, where we're installing a mechanical screw press, which will thicken our liquid biosolids. We still can make Class B out of it, but it's also a Class A capable machine. That would be expensive to put that much into it, but it is possible to do. This machine will meet our capacity for our annual biosolids if we choose to not land apply and dispose of it in landfill, which is not very eco-friendly. So we are working on the issue, and the machine has been ordered, it's being built, and should go online by the first of the year. So we do have alternatives we're working on. Just not there yet. But I started this program 18 months ago, so I'm sure glad I started it then. not tomorrow.
It's a trailblazer. Matt, Dan, you've got a couple minutes left for your panel. Anything to add?
Not really.
Seen our time.
All right. Give it to somebody else.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, local landowners, Jerry and Tim. I don't know why it says that on it. Seems like everybody's from the city of Toledo on these cards. Whoever, they're all, but it's not right. You guys need my help moderating the time between you, or do you have it organized? Should we just split it? What do you think?
I'll let Jerry go first, and if he runs over 4 minutes, cut him off.
If he gets to 3 minutes, I'll give him a warning.
Yeah.
But no, you've got 10, 12 minutes between you, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
I might take quite a while.
Oh, I see.
I'm kind of like Paul. Once I get started, I get on a roll.
So I've got to watch you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm Jerry Kosadar. I live on the Slets River all my life, and raised in the fifth generation there. One of my children built a home there and plopped it right down in the middle of my fields, and enjoying the beautiful sight there of that valley. Anyway, I come from a long history of farmers. They came over from Europe and began to look at the soils in this area, and my grandfather just fell in love with that valley and started to purchase it in 1904, and then in 1906 bought out the next homeowner in that area, and then cleared this beautiful valley. And the depths of those soils are just awesome. Some places along the river there's as much as 20 feet of silt loam in there, and I was sharing this morning some of the soils, and it's just a gorgeous place for me to pass on to my family. And if you look at what I've experienced in the last 26 years using biosolids, I've not had to plow as much. I bought fertilizer for the first time this year, and because I was not applied to in a couple of fields for 3 years, and so I had to go out and buy commercial fertilizer and put it on some hay meadows that were being depleted, because the biosolids, from my standpoint, have increased my yield on my pastures and hay meadows so much that I've been inundated with elk and birds of all kinds. My fields are just a magnet to the wildlife. And if you look at my herd, I've not had a vet on my property for decades. My herd is the healthiest I've ever seen. The thanks to, working with Tim, and we've learned how to, crossbreeding, and cows are so much better in health, and my livestock, I couldn't be more proud about. And in fact, my son, being a nurse, he wanted to plop his house down right there and drill a well next to that. It speaks volumes to his confidence in the fact that this biosolids, from what he's grown up with, has benefited the farm, and he's not afraid of it at all. Tim got a well right next to me, and we've applied there, like I said, for all those years, and he's had his well tested, and it's a shallow well. It's 15 feet, less. Anyway, and my son just had his well tested, in order to get his application for his loan. It had to come up pure, and it was just as pure as can be. So let me shift gears here. Instead of bragging about what I've seen with the biosolids, and it's boosted my production. Lincoln City years ago had to deal with the weed infestation and on the lake, and poor Don Cotola moved and bought Old McMillan's dairy out, one of the last two dairies in the county, and right away here comes all this pressure on him to clean up the stream because the weed infestation was affecting Devil's Lake. Well, they put so much pressure on this poor young farmer, this dairyman. They said, no, you got to fence back your fences, you've got to build new barns, you've got to put new manure systems in, you're going to have to only have 60 head of cattle. Well, that killed the dairyman. That poor guy, he lost it. Then they did an aerial photo flew over Devil's Lake, looked with infrared. He had there was a light pink coming out of the rock crate, but a deep dark red all around the 300 homes, their septic systems, and all the fertilizer they were putting onto their yards. Poor farmer bit it in the dust. Another thing that speaks volumes to me is the operators. I've had two operators that applied sludge on my property for years. Guess who they ordered beef from? Me. I mean, these guys test that stuff, they see that stuff, they work with that stuff, and who bought beef from me? They did. That spoke volumes to me. I thought, well, they trust their work. They know the science behind it. The river I'm concerned about. I just spent $90,000, fixing 500 feet of that. Trying to grow trees and stuff on there to protect that stream. I'm very concerned. We can't hardly fish, but I'm telling you to look at all areas of where this, stuff is coming from, because the forestry department just spent, they probably put on hundreds of tons of fertilizer, all around us on that 25-year-old stand. So what we put on is just a little pittance compared to what, they put on. So I don't know. I'm saying that, we got to look at all aspects of this. Everyone's got septic systems. Everyone's a part of the problem. So all of us got to chip in and work at this.
So Jerry, if you're going to divide the time with Tim, then you need to cede the floor.
I'm Tim Miller. Been raised in Sluts River. My family's been there just as long as Jerry's has, since the early 1900s. I'm the third generation. Little background, I have a Bachelor of Science degree from Oregon State University in Agriculture. I went in the Air Force as a lieutenant, spent 8 years active duty, got out active duty, spent another 20 years in the reserves, retired as a colonel out of reserves. I've been looking at this biosolid stuff for probably 25 years. Then it was, the heavy metals, watch out for the heavy metals was all they said. Then Lincoln City wanted to apply the field next to me, next to John Jerry's. They came to me, they tested my water, my well. They gave me the analysis of what they were going to put on. It seemed pretty good. After 5 years, they came back and tested my well. The well's tested cleaner the second time than the first time. So I don't think the biosolids cleaned it up, but anyway. From a farmer's perspective, I have never used biosolids on my field. I probably never will. It's because I have gotten an education on how to manage my fields. I don't want to give up management to somebody else. And that's what you do when that's my problem with biosolids, is you're giving up management to a third party. But as a farmer, before we put fertilizer on the field, what we do is we do a soil test. And I think earlier guys referred to that. And then also it was referred to about getting your fertilizer level from that test. So I went and looked at the analysis of all the biosolids being produced at these cities, and I found that, yes, it's about 5% nitrogen, and that's the limiting factor they go by. They can fly up to 100 pounds per acre. They apply 25 to 40 pounds per acre. And most of that is over 80% of that is tied up in organic nitrogen. That means slow release. On my hay fields, I put 35 to 40 tons of nitrogen on that is available right away. Soil scientists and crop agronomists told me that my fertilizer will be utilized by the plants in 3 weeks. So that 6 to 8 pounds per acre that's put on Jerry's field will probably be utilized within a week's time of a normal growing season. So, and that is the fertilizer that could possibly leach, is used long before we get enough rain to saturate the soil. Now, when we talk about soils, Paul's going to cringe when I say this. I'm going to put it in such basic terms. Soil is not a solid soil is, good soil is 50% solid, 50% holes or non-solid. Of that 50% non-solid, we would like to have half of that as water and the other half as air for the plants to grow well. It's very important to think of that. And that's why the organic matter put on by biosolids helps in that regard. How much time I got left?
You have about 2 minutes.
2 minutes, so I'm going to jump all over and talk really fast. When I first heard about more algae, moss in the Sluts River, I went and checked. Hey, there seemed to be a little bit more. So I went down to Cedar Creek, which property we own, which never had biosolids on it. And lo and behold, there was more moss and algae there. And who did I meet down there? But the guys doing the fish surveys that are going up and down all the tributaries all over. And I said, hey, Kip, are you seeing more? And he says, you mean the stuff? Yeah, I says, yeah, that's the stuff. He says, yeah, we're seeing it on all the tributaries. So if it's on all the tributaries and only the main stem has biosolids, it can't be caused by the biosolids. Now we jump back to the plants. Our forage plants will only take up what they need to grow. They will take up a small amount of micronutrients that they need. They can't take up excessive amounts. If they could, then we would put on magnesium and selenium in large quantities, and we wouldn't have to buy small meg blocks and selenium blocks to keep our cows healthy and growing. Most of the pharmaceuticals or the chemicals that everybody wants to talk about, if they make it through the process and hit the field, they're going to attach themselves to the organic matter in the soil. And once they're attached to the organic matter in the soil, they can move a little bit, but they can only move by mechanical action. So if they're on this drop of water floating around, and that water goes down, it's pulled by gravity, because that's why water goes down, that water will squeeze through a little tiny crack in that little hole. That organic matter will get caught, and it'll be lodged there and won't move. Organic matter is not going to move more than an inch or two within the soil without a mechanical action, such as a cow's hoof or aerating with a machine.
I think we're done.
And I only have a dozen more items to go.
Well, this is the first one. Thank you. So our next and last panel, and I have to say, our panelists are doing a tremendous job of sharing a lot of information in a very short period of time, and you're doing a tremendous job of listening very respectfully. So I look forward to hearing the kind of comments that you have. And make sure to fill out your comment cards if you want to speak during the comment time, and we'll have someone, I don't know, Wayne, Casey, come through and pick them up. All right, so we have Stan and Adam, is that right? And Casey? You, Casey? And Adam? And Stan. Do you need some help moderating among you, or do you have it all as one person?
4 minutes apiece, is that right?
Yep, 4 minutes apiece.
I've got a little timer.
I can help you with that.
Kenny? Okay.
Ready to go?
Hang on a second.
Stan, you already know who he is.
Well, thanks for having me today. I work for the Confederate Tribes of Siletz. I've been a biologist for the tribe for a little over 20 years. I've discussed biosolids with several of the residents in the area. I've known Tim and Jerry, who were just up here, for a number of years. I have not been involved with testing directly related to biosolids and nitrogen, phosphorus, and other chemicals that folks are talking about that could be part of this biosolids runoff. So I'm going to talk briefly today. I was just asked to talk about what we in the Natural Resources Department have been involved with as far as water quality and testing, and I'll try to put that in a framework relative to what we might have for data as this process moves forward, how folks may be interested in making comparisons to earlier points in time and current points in time, if you will, for some of our projects. How many of you all are familiar with the acronym TMDL? It stands for Total Daily Maximum Loading. It's a process that DEQ embarked on with the Central Coastal area a number of years ago, almost 20 years ago, I think. And it's kind of had a number of fits and starts and stops. So the tribe has been involved with that process. Through that process, the tribe has been able to apply for EPA dollars to do assessment work and monitoring work, as are other entities. Within that process, a number of years ago, the tribe decided they wanted to look at stream temperatures, how stream temperatures varied across the basin, both in tributaries and along the main stem. We wanted to look at suspended sediments, so we're talking about real fine soils that are suspended in the water column during storm events. So this is not algae, and it's not what you might see that creates cloudiness or turbidity during the summertime. We're talking about winter storm events, 2 inches, 3 inches. The river jumps up from 6 feet to 10 feet, 20 feet. So a real heavy storm period. We looked at herbicide runoff for a number of years. We didn't look at every herbicide out there, but we predominantly focused on herbicides opposed to pesticides. So there's a difference there. Not talking about chemicals that target insects. We're talking about chemicals that are used to control different plant growth. We've looked at what we call benthic macroinvertebrates. So those are all little bugs that crawl around the bottom of the stream, eat algae off the rocks. We've also looked at the algal community itself. So just about 20 years ago, I think it was in 02 or 03, we did a study because we had concerns about just what was going on in the river and what we did or did not understand. So within that study, we went out and characterized all the paraphyton or algal species in the stretch of the main stem and portions of several tributaries.
We didn't do anything with those data because there was nothing to really compare those data with. That's a data set that's out there that we all could look at again and make some current comparisons to. Several folks have been referencing algal blooms and different kinds of algal communities or species they never saw before. Using data like the stuff that's collected in the past would be a way to compare whether we really do have different species in place now.
Please stand.
1 minute. Okay.
Share with your panelists. That's a lot.
So we've been involved with a number of other projects that are not specifically water quality related. We have the potential to help assist with this process, think through with the community what a reasonable way to move forward would be that wouldn't involve a lot of finger pointing, that would collect adequate data, reasonable data to make appropriate evaluations. With that,
Oh,
Ed.
thank you.
Adam.
Well, again, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Adam Dendlinger. I am representing Mid-Coast Water Planning Partnership. Sorry, I wear a few hats in the region. So I also manage the Seal Rock Water District and the community that serves water to the community between South Beach and Wallport. And we receive our water from the Siletz River. So this has been very educational for me to be a part of this process, following the information in the media and the minutes from various meetings, and then getting the feedback from folks today. What I want to introduce to you is something that is going on in this region. It's part of the state's integrated water resources strategy. It's place-based planning. It's the Mid-Coast Water Planning Partnership. It's a group of water suppliers in the region from Lincoln City to Yachats and inland by about 1.5 miles. It's several communities that are focused on the region's water supply, how to protect it, how to secure it for future generations, and how to use it wisely between the systems that supply water to the community in the Mid-Coast Basin here. One of the things I really liked about the opening panelists was a call to local management of our streams, our watersheds, because that's really what we're all talking about here, and that's the focus of the Water Planning Partnership, is to more locally take control of our supplies, our water quality, our water quantity within the region, and how best to use that so that it can continue to be sustainable, not just for the communities we serve, but for the environment as well. So I would encourage you, I'll leave some pamphlets here, some information about the Mid-Coast Water Planning Partnership, its focus and its mission. If you would like more information about it, it seems to coalesce a great deal with much of what is being said here this afternoon. So that's why I really appreciate the opportunity to bring this information to you. Some of the challenges require a coordinated approach since no one entity can address them alone. So we recognize that this is really a collaborative effort. Much of what you're doing today is collaboration centered around the focus of protecting streams and providing source water to the communities and making sure that that source water can continue to be available to the communities that we serve. How much time do I have?
You have 1 minute. I was just about ready to bid it up.
All right. So just some quick notes. We're looking at a lot of things. How to replace infrastructure so that it can maximize its use within the region, not just for any one localized agency, but how we can introduce collaborative efforts to improve our infrastructure so that it has more of a regional impact. We, of course, following recent events, we We want to relieve late season pressure on rivers. As everyone knows, the Siletz River is critically low this time of year, and most of the communities after yesterday received a notice with regard to water curtailment as a result of that. So we want to make sure that we can ensure that our environment has the water that it needs, but not just that, our community as well. So I'll leave some information here and be happy to answer any other questions you have.
Casey?
My name is Casey Lyon with the Oregon Health Authority Drinking Water Services. Our primary role is to protect public drinking water systems. So we regulate public water systems to make sure that the 91 regulated contaminants are all below the thresholds. And we also recently we have temporary rules for cyanobacteria, as Aaron Borsenko mentioned. After the Salem incident, we wanted to make sure other communities are protected from the same cyanobacteria that impacted Salem. So we currently have these temporary rules affecting around 100 systems that need to require raw water testing. We're also working on permanent rules for the next season and beyond. But I think my primary role today was just to talk about drinking water protection. We do have some federal dollars that come into the state for drinking water protection purposes. And there is grants available for public water systems, up to $30,000 available for doing drinking water protection efforts. And this could be testing the raw water, testing your water to see if there's any endocrine disruptors, any kind of emerging contaminants that are of a concern. I don't want to take too much time because I think you guys have a little bit more to offer, but I wanted to at least mention the grants that are available. Drinking water protection grants are up on the Oregon Health Authority drinking water website. I think usually every spring we submit, or public water systems would submit letters of interest. And so that I would encourage water systems that are interested to do the testing, because that's kind of the bottom line, is test the water, see what you got.
Well, gentlemen, you have a minute if you'd like to wrap up.
I'm going to ask our general manager, Brenda Bremner, if you'd like to say anything. So we had a council meeting, was it June, Brenda, that the SOS group came and testified to the council. Council wrote a letter. Would you like to state anything about the tribe's interest at this point, where they'd like to move forward, other than the technical stuff that I mentioned?
Not really.
Okay.
I think on behalf of the tribe, we're willing to support, the communities looking at the water and making sure that the rivers are clean, and that, we have a huge interest in rivers producing salmon and eels for our culture and our communities. And so, we've sent a letter to the governor urging that testing occur and that the issue be looked into. So.
Great. All right. Thank you. Thank you. So that brings us to our public comments, and I'm going to look to Chair Hunt. Chair Hunt. Nope, he's here. So, we want to end the meeting at 4 or 4:30? Because we originally talked about 4, which would be
since we have many people who would like to comment.
That's why I wanted to make sure that you.
And I believe we modified the agenda to allow it to go at 4:30, but I will tell you that I have a very critical board meeting that I have to chair for CASA at 5 o'clock in Newport. So I will be leaving at about 4. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to change my CASA board meeting. But happy to have the meeting go until 4:30. I will say I think it's been nice to hear different viewpoints. Certainly, as you've already indicated, we've been respectful. I think we've got an air of cooperation, collaboration, and certainly want to move forward. So I'll let you pull names out of the hat or stack the cards, and I think unless there's objections, we'll go until about 4:30. I'm looking for Wayne. Where'd Wayne go? Okay, well,
All right, well, let's see how many people have signed up to speak. Can somebody help me collect if there are any more in the
I can
audience?
pick up others
Do you
that are
mind?
more. Made my job easy. All right.
Volunteer for the job is already done.
Yeah, timing is everything.
Yeah. All right. So the way we'll do the public comment is folks can, so I just have a stack here randomly. I'll just start from the top. I think we'll probably have time to hear from everybody. We'll ask that you keep your comments to up to 3 minutes. And I'll monitor the time as you've seen that I've done that. And then we do want to allow some time at the end just to wrap up with next steps. What can you expect next in terms of where to get more information? When will there be another meeting? Hopefully Wayne will come back because he has some things that he wants to share about that. So why don't we just start with the first person I've got on the list here, and I'll do my best to say your names properly. I think this is Jan Kenyon. Is that right? Hi, Jen. Come on up. And if it's all right, I'll do the 1 minute warning at the 2 minute mark.
Do you want me to sit, stand?
You do whatever is most comfortable for you. Since there's no mic, you can just belt it out. Yep, you just belt it out. And I'll just come sit over here.
Okay. So my name is Jan Kenyon. I live in Newport, and I'm a member of Lincoln County Community Rights. So we've been talking about the nuts and bolts, the science of sludge, as if harm can be reduced to nuts and bolts, interchangeable parts to be tinkered with, as if nature herself can be jimmied into this reductionist view. I'd like to thank Casey Miller for helping me reach some clarity on what I know to be true. In an email, he posed an important question to me. I paraphrase. How do we vet scientific information which is outside the current EPA DEQ paradigm? As a scientist, activist, and a human being, here's my response. As you know, finding, quote, truth through science is a slippery slope. Data is only as good as the eyes and beliefs through which it is filtered. I've watched wonderful people argue themselves blue over science to come to differing conclusions. I've seen people on every side of an issue be sure that they have the moral high ground. I've seen people almost come to blows and people dip into despair. I believe that people should be able to make a free choice about which version of reality suits them. So providing access to respected sources of varying viewpoints is essential. But at the end of the day, I'm a member of Lincoln County Community Rights because I know there are fundamental principles that are beyond science, like we're all human. We have a common humanity. We live in something larger than ourselves, individually and collectively. And we have a capacity to care for ourselves and each other, to come together and form protecting, nourishing communities, and we should have a right to do so. To tear apart the fabric of what sustains us and then limit our response to that harm is a violation of our humanity, not just our rights as stated in the Oregon and federal constitutions. We have a right to heal ourselves, our communities, and our natural world who cannot speak for herself. I was a physician during a chunk of my adulthood, and then I was a farmer for 10 years. As a sustainable farmer, I realized that the Hippocratic Oath was fundamental to all human activity. First and foremost, do no harm. These principles are building blocks beneath the science. We need to hold these more dear than all the well-meaning efforts expressed today. And thank you for all those efforts. From these, we can find solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. So next up, we have, let's see, Gavin Curtis. Yes. I'm moving this table so you're not standing in the light. Hopefully that, so you're still standing in the light.
Still in the
Darn
line.
it.
Okay, there we go.
That's better, yeah.
Great, well, it's great to be here. I wanted to talk a little bit about, I'm not a long-term resident here, but having moved here, this is a place where I know I'm going to spend the rest of my life. So this is really important, and I think what we need to talk about here is a lot of the solutions. So the one thing I can tell is there are no cheap solutions to this. And this is not just a wastewater problem. This is a garbage problem. We're taking everything we have and just the EPA alone, it just does not provide enough support for the types of things, all these different pathogens and the way they transmit into the soil and into the air. There's thousands of ways. I just read a quote out of a study that said we're woefully inept in our ability to recognize what this actually does. All of these chemicals and all this concentrated stuff being spread onto the land over and over again, and it's being picked up by birds, by deer. The transmission is in all different ways. So I think there are solutions out there. There's ways that we can clean our water, that we can clean up our garbage. We can't just keep dumping it. Okay, that's not the solution. The solution is a circular pattern where it's all used properly, and those are out there. I've done a lot of research in the last 6 months, and I can promise you there's solutions out there, but they are not cheap. So the big thing is we have to recognize we do have to monetize our garbage and our waste, and you can. There are processes out there that you can monetize. I mean, the one good thing about our waste, it is valuable. I mean, we look at it as like, oh, we just throw it away. It's not. If we look at it properly, we can make it like gold and make it work for us rather than against us. Thank you.
Next up, Alan Davis.
We have some problems with that. It's a study from the EPA, and they were using their concerns about land application, biosolids have grown, and so they used they did a centrifugal or centrifugal and lime and polymers to get it out. They said they still, after they did this, had 20% of the soil samples contained detectable concentrations of indirect viruses. They also had a concentration of airborne and soil-bound contaminants during the application of biosolids on the land. Excuse me. And this is all by the EPA, their own study, so they're saying they can't get it out. And you are right, there is a thing called plasmic gasification, and that it takes out 90% of the biosolids. It turns it into a liquid. It's self-propelled. You can sell the gas for other things, propel cars and stuff. But like Mr. Gavin said, it's very expensive. But that's the best way to do it. And it's all about money. Maybe there's grants to the government and stuff to find. But if we keep on trashing our land, we're a ticket to hell because you can't do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, Shireen Malik Rowland. Did I pronounce that all right?
You did.
Welcome, come on up.
I too am a local resident of Lincoln County. I grew up on the Siletz River.
Do you mind stand back here? Yeah, it made a little space. So.
I got hay from Jerry and from Jerry's dad, Uncle Joe. For years, my dad did in the 60s. It was with a great deal of pride that I got my hay from Jerry's. I have to say that, but I had to stop. I had to stop because, like, cows have, 3 bellies on a cow? A horse has 1. And I have horses. I have valuable horses. And I kept trying to get my hay from Jerry's, but I kept having health issues after health issues with my horses. I had OSU step in, I had various vets, I tried soaking the hay, I tried doing things. They all came back to me and said, it's what he's putting on his field is getting in the horse. Go to a different source. So I did. I started asking farmers when I went to buy my hay, how do you fertilize? What do you use? I got educated. I had to get educated after about a $6,000 vet bill and damn near losing my prize mare. It scared the hell out of me. So by doing this and doing what my vets told me and the vets at OSU, I went to different hay sources. My horse still has some lumps. She can still get aggravated by certain dust. I've soaked my hay when I got it from Jerry. I had tubs in every stall I had. I'd soak it for days. It's a mess. It was a mess. But the point is that what goes into your soil comes out, and what you consume is in your bodies. And my horses are a tribute to that, because as much as I still want to buy hay from Jerry, I don't anymore. I travel clear over to Redmond and I buy hay, and I quit feeding supplements too because of it. So my thing is that you are what you eat, and if we love our river, it shouldn't be about cost. It should be about the future of our children. And it doesn't matter what it costs us, because if we lose the water, we lose everything. Exactly.
Kayleen Davis.
Hi. I just have a few more quick questions. Okay. You know me, so I don't need to-
Yeah, don't stand in
For one, the EPA, the handbook, it does show that they know there's dangers both from the air, from getting in the water, and from the food, and in your skin, even, and it says in the river, swimming in the river. I just wanted to point that out, and that is in that handbook that he showed. Another thing when reading through this, and the DEQ, by the way, we're the second worst state for the record keeping. I think that's in the last page of our resources, but DEQ, we're way behind. We failed. Was it 2013, our water quality? We lost funding. I've requested a lot of the state records from the DEQ. Truthfully, they're a mess. The form for the annual report has no place to put a date. There's no way to tell once you print them out what the dates are if the city forgets to put a cover letter on. Toledo said 2004 when I opened it, but when you looked at it and you put your valves on there, it came up 2016. But they couldn't tell me, how for sure you really know that's the date. H2O&S, the last one to dump the second day of the Powell. DEQ, Pat Hines, I talked to you. You couldn't contact them. You left messages, emails. Well, from the picture, you can see they were out there pulling up their stakes and dumping the last of that on downed hay. Now, one of your farmers maybe could tell us why you would dump that on downed hay. Oregon is watching for dump sites where we're dumping that, and then up above we can see the white where all the shrimp has been dumped. It really stinks. I've gotten sick going outside in the last few years from the smell. The permits are old. Back June 20th, I had a conversation with Renee and Paul Kennedy on the phone. You told me you were going to redo those permits. You weren't real sure, but June 20th, you're going to get back to me in about a week. Still waiting. And as far as the wild game, well, that choice has been made now for all of us, hasn't it? Because, like I said, they're in the fields. I personally didn't want to eat that stuff. We traveled a long ways to get our hay, not to have this in our hay. And then I realized the elk in our freezer, it's contaminated. Everybody. How many of you guys were raised on wild game here? I know I was. I was raised out in the wilderness. Learning fishing. One more minute. Okay. And then the fun one I found that just really made me sick. As they're looking at this in solutions from the DEQ, and this is coming from the EPA, but a lot of this water quality goes by the population. So us in these little areas, if there's 10,000 or less in the area, they just have to make sure they only introduce one new cancer per 10,000 people. And I tell you, it doesn't make me feel very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Kaylee. Next up, Celine.
All the talk of salmon's making me hungry.
Yeah.
I don't have much to say, but I did write down the name Casey Lyons. Where are you? Okay, because we have individuals on our core group here that are willing to pay for tests, but we don't really know the cost really, but is that something the Save Our Silettes could tap into the grants that you have?
Well, the grants are just for the public water systems. So like the city, SLED, or any community public water systems. Yeah.
Well, we're still looking for some help financially. But yeah, and I do like what the gentleman said, because it's horrible to think that we can't eat money, you know? We can't. And whatever it takes, we have got to find the money to save the water, because water is life for all of us. We all know that. I've enjoyed hearing all of you speak, but it's like, we have individuals that aren't willing to pay for the test, you know? And we thought about putting cans out, but we just haven't done all those things yet. You know, we're so busy trying to get the petition through, but anyway, that was my question.
I think you could work with the city, and then if the city applies,
Yeah.
I think that's possible.
For the city.
The public water system.
Right.
So more conversations with Casey. Yep, so follow-up conversation with Casey then.
What'd you say? All the cancer? Oh, yeah, there's so many young people even that live on our river that's gotten cancer over the years, and, you know, it's really sad to think of. Yeah, it's more than the biosolids, it's what the timber industry has done. We understand all that Mr. Kuzler spoke about too, about that, but, you know, we have to save this for future generations. It's in our tribal constitution. It's our responsibility as adults to make a change and to clean our water.
Thank you so much. Next up is Allison McGrath. Hi, Allison.
Thank you for having me. I
step back just 10 minutes.
Okay. I just like go all the way and hide in
Yes. You're great, doing great.
So I don't have necessarily a lot to add to this. I mean, a lot of, it's very educational to come to this, and I want to thank everybody for coming and doing this. It's kind of renewed my faith in local government. This is how things get started. One of the things that when I joined the Save Our Silettes, they're a really small group, and so talking like what Casey had brought up about the grants, like I guess just what is our next step, like to reach out to our county commissioners and our local government that's here and say that yes, it might be expensive to come up with different solutions, but we talk a lot about water rights, but with those water rights come responsibilities, and I too have grown up here. I've spent pretty much my whole life in Lincoln County, and I have kids as well, and I want to be able to take them out to enjoy the river and the things, be able to enjoy the fish that we have. It's torture to live in this beautiful place if we are afraid that we can't swim in the water and we can't eat the fish, we can't eat the elk. And so I guess I would like to reach out to our local agencies and our representatives that are here as well and say, help us create some kind of a task force, because this little group alone can't do it all. And if we're not able to apply for these, the money and for the grants and things like that, like how do we help get our cities and the people on board who have that power and who are able to do that with us? And I agree that cost shouldn't be something that we look at when we look at where we're living.
Hey, Joe Steer? Joe Steer? Is that right?
Could be.
Could be. Is that you?
No, I don't have much to add to the conversation. If we do some testing on the Silettes, I'd like to see additional testing, and I'd like to see it done by people that maybe all the different parties agree on, and again, get some areas that we think are inadequate and test those inadequate areas. So, I am a farmer on the river. I don't know anybody that's on the river that's trying to hurt the river. So that's the part I don't like. I don't like the finger pointing. That really gets me down. But I know most of the people, and none of them are trying to damage the river. So I just want to put that out there.
Joe, thank you. Margaret Patterson.
Well, I've been called the lady that doesn't have to say every many words, but a picture says 1,000 words. I have pictures of the river that I have lived on for 52 of my 70 years, and I won't send them out because I want them back, but I want you to come up afterwards and take a look at my riverfront that I cannot use anymore. I've lived there. I've swam in that river all my life. My kids swim in the river. My grandkids have swum in that river. I have great-grandchildren now. And this little boy in this picture is my great-grandchild. And this is what it looked like in 2015. This is 2016. This is 2017. This year, I can't even see the bedrock. So it's getting worse. I'll show also some pictures of what it was like when we could play in the river.
And Margaret, are these pictures along the bottom a current condition, or is this a historical?
This is all current.
Okay, so people know what they're looking at.
Yeah, these are current conditions, and I've put the years of how it's changed, and then I'll leave some pictures here of how it was in 2015.
Oh, 2015.
I'm a farmer's daughter, so I know you have to fertilize. But at the quantity that's going out, you're talking 11 days, 6 trips a day. And I had, sit down, I'm retired, so I didn't have anything to do with it. I sat down and I wrote the times. There were 6 trips a day going to one field, 120 acres, 660,000 gallons. That's 5,500 gallons per acre. So it's the quantity that's going out. Don't put so much out that it doesn't do the land any good anymore. It goes into the river. I sent letters to Senator Gomberg, or Senator Gomberg, and State Representative from Oakland.
It's the other way around.
I did send letters to them. I didn't get response.
You just moved them to different places.
I did get a response, however, from the Secretary of State, Dennis Richardson. He wrote me a very nice letter back. He is sending all the information that I sent him on to the state auditor, Kip Mimont, so he can look at what is happening to our river. So I hope maybe through all of this, we can get something done.
Thank you, Margaret. Ida Bell Gray. Is that you? You're going to stand in for Ida Bell? Well, I'll set her over here. Joyce Mosseri? Mosseri. Come on up, Joyce. Or you can stand and speak there, either way. Scared kids.
So I'm Joyce Mosseri. I grew up in Logston, lived on the river, swam on the river, did everything. What's happening, I don't know what's happening, but we need to find out. If it is coming from the biosolids, we need to stop. Our lives depend on it. Our kids, our grandkids, our great-grandkids, it all depends on us to stand up and say, we have to stop. And hopefully we'll come up with something that will start cleaning the river up. Because otherwise, we're not gonna have drinking water. We'll have to buy it from someplace else and bring it in, and it's gonna be crazy. So we have to think about what we're doing for our future people. We can't leave this. It's sad.
Cynthia George.
Oh, boy. So, a lot of you know me. I am the owner of a contaminated well in Toledo 20 years ago. with 860 parts per million of aluminum in the water alone. And you know, aluminum is a secondary contaminant. They don't even regulate that. So they can just pump that poison egg into your home and nobody cares. I cannot believe that we've had every one of these officials up here, EPA, DEQ, and not one number. Nobody's given us dissolved oxygen, nobody's given us pH, nobody's given us anything still. So what everybody came here to do was sit here and pat each other on the back, but we got still no data. And that's wrong. So the gentleman from Siletz that did the studies, why is that not, we need that data to go back on. And this testing, there's companies out there that can do complete analysis between $200 and $500. We could have huge amount of data. So you guys did a DEQ study through Lincoln County Soil and Water. I guess that data just went in, was just submitted, and that's 6 to 18 months before we're going to ever even know what that study says. So what good does any of this do us? Why are we not buying monitor devices that can be set into the river and we get real-time data? They make them. So why we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on all of this scientific study and we got nothing. Still, we don't know what's happening with the water. I also said the cyanobacteria. Somebody said they're testing for cyanobacteria. I was told they're testing the treated water, not the raw water. So somebody needs to clear that up too, because I heard they're finding little pockets and where they can get it and all these things. Are they testing the raw water?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Raw water.
Let's make sure.
Hey, Cynthia, thanks. John Sullivan?
John or John Keith?
John L. Sullivan. Is that right?
Junior, yeah.
Sure? No?
Thank you.
Okay, come on up.
You know, I want to thank everybody for coming out today. I'm a resident just below, just outside of Logston, on the river, on the Sludge River. I don't live here full-time, so I don't have the same knowledge of the river that some of you do, but I've been coming and fishing the river since 1985. And it's a beautiful place, and it's a place that's special to my heart. One of the things I noticed is that, you know, it's, I think a couple of you mentioned it, that it gets really easy to throw stones and point fingers, and he's doing it, she said, and I said. And I think, you know, the bigger picture is, you know, you can debate whether the existing rules and regulations, you know, for the land application of sewage sludge, and it is sewage sludge, it's not biosolids. That was a marketing ploy. For sewage sludge, you know, it is adequate. You can debate whether the enforcement of the rules, okay, that and regulations that are being adequately enforced. Some people claim they are, some people claim they aren't. I think for the most part, everybody's trying to do their best. The issue is that people don't quit flushing the toilet. Okay, the waste is going to be created. You've got people who have to try to get rid of this stuff the best way they know how. I think then the question says, okay, can you debate, you know, whether applying sewage sludge, you know, which is a potential source of 16 heavy metals, 50 pathogens, you've read it all, 175 synthetic chemicals, 72 pharmaceuticals, 26 steroids, is the right decision? Do you even need to debate it? Should you be applying it on the Sludge River Basin? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, that part, you get past all the finger pointing, you get past throwing the stones, you just probably shouldn't be applying it where it's going to get into the drinking water for 3 municipalities and 15,000 people. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. You know, it's interesting that, you know, and then you get, and obviously the endangered or threatened coho salmon and maybe soon to be threatened coastal cutthroat. They don't get a say in this, you know? So we need to take care of that. We need to make sure that we're watching that too.
John, you've got one.
1 minute? Okay, thank you. It's interesting, I came across, a DEQ had a publication, and
It's called Developing Strategies for Drinking Water Protection. It's designed for the municipality. And it states, the primary goal of the drinking water protection strategies should be to reduce or minimize the risk of pollution in source water. Right there, right? And I would add that you would say eliminate in addition to reduce and minimize. And it's kind of interesting, with that stated goal and the alternatives that are available, and there are alternatives, and they do cost money, it seems kind of crazy that the government entity, DEQ, our state government entity, would continue to approve these land application sites. It just seems counterproductive. So I'll end it with that.
Oh, I guess there are two John Sullivans. There's a John T. and a John L. You were John T.?
That was John.
You were John L.? Who, is there a John T. Sullivan? Oh, there you are.
Unfortunately, I'm not quite the eloquent speaker that my son is. First off, I would like to say one thing. There are no bad guys here. No bad guys, okay? And secondly, in my life, what I pretty much found that money dictates. And so you've got municipalities here that want to get rid of their waste. They have to get rid of their waste. They have no other choice. They want to get rid of it as cheaply as they possibly can because they don't have much money either. You've got farmers out here that want to grow crops. These crops do best with fertilizer. You've got a city that's going to carry this fertilizer to them in a tanker truck, spread it on their field for free. Doesn't cost them anything. And recently, some of those farmers are even getting paid to accept that sewage sludge on their pasture. It's all well and good because we have an organization in our state called DEQ that's going to take care of us, that makes sure that this is done properly and there is no bad side effects. Unfortunately, this is where my interest came in. I want my neighbor across the road to have biosolids applied to his property, and I said, my goodness, it sure seems like a lot of biosolids, or sewage sludge, whichever you prefer. Turns out I sat there and monitored and counted, and it was 32 double tanker truckloads applied in 2 days to 20 acres. I checked this out, and it said, my goodness, that's 500,000 gallons. Now, I didn't know what the dry wet, I didn't know anything about that at the time. I just said, that's a lot of stuff they're putting on that pasture. And so I questioned it. That pasture was being applied to at that time by Lincoln City. Lincoln City assured me that there was no problems. And this really great guy called Joe Bissler, and I'll tell you this, a real gentleman. Talking to Joe Bissler, I said, I just have some problems with this. And he says, if we tested it, would you feel better? And I says, yes, don't you test it all the time? He says, well, no. I said, why not? Well, he says, tests cost money. I said, well, how do you get by without testing it? And he said, well, we go exactly by the law. And the law says if you apply on a field, 2 out of 3 years, you must test it at the end of the 2nd year. And if you're applying at an agronomic rate, which is the amount that the plant produces. And I said, okay, so why haven't you been testing? And he says, well, because we apply 2 years and skip a year. And we apply 2 years and skip a year. And I said, well, how long have you been doing this? And he says, oh, no, between 15 and 20 years. So I says, you're telling me that for 15 to 20 years, you have not done one single accumulative test on this soil? Nope. So he says, but I know we don't have a problem. I'm going to test to make sure. And make you happy. And I says, if there's no problem, I'll be the happiest person around here. You bet I will.
Hey, John.
So, oh man, somebody's going to limit the time. So
Should we give John more time?
They did the test.
Yes. Finish.
They did the test, and they came back. And Mr. Joe Whistler was in shock. He said, I would never have believed it. I said, what's wrong, Joe? He said, well, he says, unfortunately, that field is saturated, nitrogen and phosphorus. I said, really? And I said, well, that's not good, is it? He says, no, it's not good. And to make a long story short, so were there other fields tested and found saturated, apparently, or close to saturation, as he put it. In the newspaper, it said saturation. So subsequently, we now know that Lincoln City dewaters theirs and puts it in a dump. And that's what caused that test. Now, I want you to remember those two, nitrogen and phosphorus, right? And they did it right. They tested at the 2-foot level, they tested at the 3-foot level. They're perfect, a very good test. Unfortunately, most of our people that do these tests don't. I've reviewed tests from other cities, and there's only a single level test indicated. I could find no test, for instance, from Toledo, where they ever tested more than one depth, period. You're also supposed to test about 6 different elements as a minimum. Over half the tests from Toledo tested 3. So now we've got tests that aren't being done because they skip a year. And then I found out miraculously you don't have to test if you don't put on the full aggregate amount. So why don't we just put on 90% and we'll never have to test either? It's a fantastic deal because if you don't test, you don't know there's a problem. And if you don't know there's a problem, there's not a problem. And everybody's happy. We don't know about it. And we can go on forever. We don't even have to worry about it because no one's going to challenge us. Well, I'll skip along here and tell you this. There was an article in the paper later on by a DEQ biologist. And remembering nitrogen and phosphorus. Well, let me quote. Excessive nutrients in water, particularly phosphorus and nitrogen, which are mainly caused by sewage treatment plants, industrial treatment plants, and fertilizers, can increase the growth of phytoplankton and cause algae blooms, which we've been experiencing a lot of lately. When phytoplankton die, they're decomposed by bacteria, which consumes oxygen during the process. This reduces available oxygen to fish, which affects their survival. This includes the renowned coho salmon, presently on the threatened list. Remember, this phosphorus and nitrogen was too high level saturated. Also, you should be aware, if you can see this test result, that the level of nitrogen at the 1-foot level is 88. The level of nitrogen at the 2-foot level down is 128. Now, that tells me that the nitrogen was put on the top, went down 2 feet, the plants couldn't even use it all, and so now down at 2 feet, you've got 30% more nitrogen than you had at the 1-foot level. And be aware, this testing was done 1 year after the last application. So we had plenty of time for the plants to use it, whether it be a hay crop or a grass on the pasture that the cows grazed on. I guess the bottom line, folks, is we have a problem because our police force is not able to do its job. Now, I don't condemn any individual. Our legislators out here didn't give them the money. They didn't give them the assets to do the job. You got one man running up and down the entire West Coast trying to monitor the application of sewage sludge. That's the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. So we have proof that he didn't monitor it. We have proof that it is excessive. We have proof of what causes algae bloom in the river. And you're telling me that there's no connection? I can't buy that. Thank you.
We've got Dave Wilson.
That's a hard act to follow.
And Dave, just so you know, I gave John Ida Bell's time, so I don't have anybody else's time to give you. So you've got your 3 minutes.
All right, my main concerns are
the on-site monitoring, the on-site testing, and as Kayleen pointed out, a lot of these permits are outdated. Many of them are over 20 years old. And I'll give you an example of one. It's a permit for Toledo. It's on the so-called Hughes property. This property is located on the right side of the road just before you get to the Logsdon store. The permit was issued on May 20th, 1993 to an Anthony Dilly. Anthony Dilly hasn't lived on that site or owned that site for over 10 years. That site now belongs to Linda Hughes. As far as I'm concerned, that's a good example of a permit that needs to be reviewed, reanalyzed, and if possible, renewed. Okay. On that same site, well, if you look at Toledo's biosolids management plan, in that plan it states that each year prior to land application of biosolids, the source operators shall check to see if contiguous property owners have changed. Under current DEQ policy, if site ownership changes on an approved permit, that permit is considered invalid and a new permit must be applied for by the owner. Okay. On that same site, as far as the monitoring, Toledo applied on that site the last week of April of this year. There was wet conditions on that site. It rained during that time. DEQ's policy requires that sewage sludge not be applied when the soil is wet, and that sludge be applied in a manner that will not result in ponding. Okay, I've got a picture of what happened on that site after they'd applied. You can see by the tire tracks that site was probably wet. There's ponding there. Okay. The reason that they don't want the ponding is because they're worried about the leaching through the root zone and potentially reaching the water table below. On that site, there's a shallow rock layer, and the water table is on the top of that rock layer. And there's several wells in that area that pull their water off of that rock layer. Just across the road is the site that John Sullivan was talking about. And that rock layer pretty much comes right to the surface out in that field.
Dave, you got that one.
One more minute, okay. Another example of the ponding. This is up by Moonshine Park after they had applied in September of 2017. You can see the ponding on that site. In the background here, this is Moonshine Park back here in the Sletts River. That ponding, when I went up there this year, they applied again this year, over 500,000 gallons. The flies and the birds were on there, and I'm sure some of those drifted over to Moonshine Park and shared the wealth over there to the picnickers and the campers. The tribe, as has been said, they wrote a letter to the governor, and we appreciate that. The county commissioners are kind of on board on doing something. It was mentioned earlier by the county commissioners, a couple of them. This is kind of like watching the canary in the coal mine, waiting for it to die. Difference is, in the coal mine, that's going to recover probably pretty quick. As far as the Sletts River, if we go too far on that and it dies, it's probably going to take decades to recover. And I don't think we can wait for that canary to die.
Thanks, Dave. Are you all done?
Yeah.
We've got another David Dahl. Well, you know, there are two comment cards where people checked no, they did not want to speak out. But then there were two that didn't check any box. So I don't know if Penelope is here and wants to speak. Did you want to speak, Penelope? And then Marla or Carla? Is there a Marla or a Carla? A Souse? Maria.
Maria.
Did you want to speak, Maria?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
then I'll check those. All right, so you're not the last one.
Okay. My name's David Daly. I grew up in the Siletz Bay, and I want to also have a narrative about the bay, the bottom of this river dialogue. We're talking all about upriver, and we've got civil engineers retired living in the bay, and I've walked with them. And our rainwater runoff in the bay, when they installed it, there was a 2-foot drop that it would fall into the bay. And right now, we all went down there, that conduit is below ground 2 feet. When it pumps the water out, there's actually a pond above it. So we also need to look at the health of the bay in context to the river, upriver. And I just think from this dialogue, it would be cool to have all stakeholders all along this entire waterway, because this has served this community. Back in the 70s, my dad welded the film crew kits to the film that was filmed on the Siletz River, Sometimes a Great Notion, in the 70s. And I just think it's a neat opportunity for us today to have our opportunity to come together to make this waterway service like it's done for a long time. Thank you.
Maria, not Carla, not Marla.
Okay, I'd like to add another perspective to all of this discussion, and which is that we have to take a look. I'm Maria Sauce, and I am a member of Lincoln County Community Rights. That we have to take a look at our legal system, which is what allows all of this situation to happen, whether caused by application of treated sludge to land or whether it's caused by pesticides. It's the same thing. Our legal system regulates in order to protect industry, not to protect the people. I have here a very condensed account of a 37-page study conducted at Cornell University. A few people that are here may have heard me read from that before, but most of you haven't, I think. It makes it clear how little we know of the contents and effects of this sludge that's being used as fertilizer, and how incompletely the EPA regulates all of these things. The purpose of treating the sludge is to treat the water that it is mixed with. Therefore, contaminants wind up being concentrated in the sludge. Only a minimal number of these contaminants are regulated by the EPA and must be monitored. No monitoring is required of the rest. Once the soil has been contaminated, it is difficult to clean it up. Now, following is a list of the most important contamination paths which the EPA has failed to consider. Children ingest soil as part of their normal behavior and may not be sufficiently protected in a home garden scenario. Crops accumulate heavy metals at varying rates, and different sites contain different amounts of contaminants. This affects uptake coefficients. There are no special regulations for the amounts of heavy metals in sludge applied to crop soil. PCBs are persistent, slow to degrade, and they bioaccumulate. More than 50% of dioxins, which is one of the most potent poisons we know of, and furans have been found in soil 20 years after sludge application. Components of detergents suspected to be endocrine disruptors are found in relatively high levels in sludges. 1 minute. Monitoring of groundwater to protect shallow wells located downgradient of sludge fields does not consider that the dilution expected in the downward travel may be minimized by channels created by worms and roots.
The EPA is not protective of the smaller streams in agricultural areas where sludge is applied. Microbial functions in soils can be adversely affected at metal concentrations that are not necessarily toxic to crops. Cattle that graze on land to which sludge has been applied will ingest 1 to 18% of sludge along with the plants they eat while grazing. The EPA risk assessment assumes a soil ingestion of 1.5% of diet. Denmark and Sweden do not allow grazing on land to which sludge has been applied. Most microbes concentrated in sludge are significantly present in Class B sludges. Class A sludges may still allow the presence of viruses, which are not monitored. The concentration of mercury in air over sludge sites is 10 to 100 times the background concentration. The study concludes that the EPA's lax policies have resulted in regulations that are not adequately protective of human health and the environment. We, the people, are the only ones who can change this situation.
And our final speaker is Penelope.
Thank you very much.
You want to speak from there?
Yeah, I'll just stay here.
Okay. Okay, folks, if we can give Penelope our attention as our final speaker, and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to quote a couple of outtakes from the Department of Infectious Diseases, from the Canadian Department of Infectious Diseases, and from their journal, the Canadian Journal of Infectious Diseases. They write, there is a case against the land application of sewage sludge pathogens. Sewage sludge contains high concentrations of wastes. A 100-acre spread of sewage sludge represents the annual fecal output of approximately 1,400 people, plus industrial waste. To compare sludge with manure, a field of a similar size would support 100 cattle. It's stated in this article that there is consensus between the EPA and the Ontario Canadian government with regards to the pathogen risk. The Environmental Protection Agency in the United States and the Ontario government, along with their Water Environmental Association, agreed that the pathogen risks from land applications of sewage sludge have not been adequately evaluated. Together, these agencies agreed that the pathogen risks from the land application of sewage sludge have not been adequately evaluated. Therefore, this being the case, should our government and our local governments allow, and by allowing, promote the transfer of these wastes onto the countryside? Is it reasonable to ask rural residents to live next to sites where human excrement mixed with industrial waste is stockpiled and spread on the land? I did want to quote, I think that Mr. Sullivan made mention of it's sludge, and it is sludge. It was a marketing thing. John Stauber from the Center of Media Democracy and a research writer states that referencing his book on toxic sludge. In the spring of 1995, while we were finishing up our book, Toxic Sludge is Good for You, I got a call from a very pleasant woman by the name of Nancy Blatt, who said she was with the Water Environment Federation. The Water Environment Federation is the sewage sludge industry. It's this massive Washington, D.C. based nationwide lobby that represents all the municipal sewage sludge plants. And Nancy Blatt was calling to say that she'd heard we had a book coming out in the fall of '95 with this title, Toxic Sludge is Good for You. And she was quite concerned by the title because, in fact, they don't really consider it toxic sludge anymore. They don't like to call it that. It's called biosolids, she said, a natural organic fertilizer. She was very worried that if we maintained the title of our book, it might interfere with their educational campaign funded by the EPA that was going to convince farmers of the U.S. to take sewage sludge and spread it on farmland. They actually sponsored a contest to come up with this Orwellian name, biosolids. They invented the name, and then they went about moving the name into the dictionary and ensuring that the dictionary definition of the name would not include the word sludge. No matter how cynical you think you are about public relations, and what's involved with and what it's involved with, which issues it's working on, you can't really keep up with the public relations industry. There really is a campaign telling us toxic sludge is good for you.
So that brings us to the end of our public comments at 4:15. As promised, so there's a couple things we need to do. One is I've got some things I'm going to write on a whiteboard about a kind of summary of some of the issues that I heard. But while I'm doing that, I wanted to invite any of the elected officials here to offer any reflections, observations. As I said, we might give you an opportunity to do that towards the end. And then we want to hear from Wayne Belmont, who has some kind of concrete suggestions about some next steps based on what we've heard today, as well as some thinking that he's done in advance of this meeting. So are there any elected officials that want to share their observations? Or Senator?
I got one. As people know, the Senate district that I'm in has been one of the epicenters for our algae bloom issues in almost all of our lakes, from Coos County on up. And so we've been trying to figure out how do we deal with that. One of the things we passed a bill a couple years ago, which I sponsored, has to do with allowing people, especially low income, to get low-income loans to fix their septic systems, because we know that septic systems on lakes in particular are a major producer of those nitrogen. When their systems fail is when the problem happens. And we have a lot of systems, we believe about 2,200 a year that are failing, and they're not being replaced. And there are new alternatives for septic systems that are better. If you come down to Lakeside, half of the year, most of the septic systems in that area are underwater. That is not a good system, just so you know. It doesn't work that way. So we're trying to get that going, and we have a nonprofit banking institution that took it on for our state, and they have tripled the money we put into it. We need to continue to put more money into it. For the last 5 years, I've been working on well testing, requiring people who rent property to have their wells tested every year. We have not been able to get through the legislature. The person who said that we have not funded DEQ appropriately is absolutely true. I have been working on that for the last 14 years. It has not been funded to the capacity it was, and there's a whole lot of reasons in the state about that. So people need to make sure that they continue to push on people for us to do that. The governors have actually, and the DEQ has put in budgets that we have not approved, so it's an ongoing thing. The reality is we haven't done very well with education either, which is one of my big issues. So funding in Oregon is a tough one right now. Funding in our communities and our cities is really tough right now. So I agree that there are no solutions that are going to go inexpensively, but we do need to work together. We do need to get the real science, and we do need to test our rivers more often. We had a couple of our scientists who have been working with water quality and the load on our streams. And one of our big issues is temperature. It continues to be a major problem. We've got to make sure that we continue to grow trees on next to the rivers. And I will tell you that our farmers have been working on that a lot. When I was a high school principal, we had a group of kids that went out and would do an analysis of the streams around Coos Bay, and they said, it's so weird. In the forest, the trees are there, it's really great, the temperature of the water, and then it goes into a farm area, and it goes up by 10 degrees, and it's a dead zone in comparison because of the temperature alone. So, but when they went and talked to the farmers and told them, you know, if you keep the cattle out of the stream, if you do these other things, you can make it better, they started planting trees. It wasn't that farmers wanted to do the wrong thing, they just needed to be told what the right thing was. And I actually do believe the one thing that has come out of this conversation is that I think when people say everybody here is trying to do the right thing, that's true. The issue is how do we come together to solve some of these bigger problems? And I will tell you that the biosolids one is a good conversation to have. I have no problem with that. It is not going to be the solution to fixing the sludge river. It's going to take a whole lot more than just that. There are other things that we're going to have to work on.
We have to start somewhere.
But we have to start, we can start all sorts of work. We should be starting all of them at the same time. We shouldn't be just doing one thing at a time. But we need to look at it and try to figure out what are solutions for that. And is there a watershed council on the sludge? Yes.
Select Watershed Council.
There is a West Watershed Council. Are they getting?
Yearly operative.
That's what that's what I was going to say.
I've been a
because-
20-year member, we have a meeting 4 times a year.
Okay, so one of the interesting things, we started, the government put up this deal about watershed councils, and some of them are amazing around the state, some of them are not so amazing. And we need to get them all amazing, because those that are working on the Coquille Valley are doing stuff with tide gates that is not being done anyplace else. They're doing things with other kinds of things, because they are getting grants and doing the kinds of things that you're asking for here. I'm committed to getting more money for water testing. I have been for the last 10 years, and if we need to figure out other ways to do that, I will work on that. And I'll work with counties and governments to do those kinds of things. But individually, people who put their themselves out there to do watershed councils, the rest of you need to help them, because watershed councils do have authority to do some things, and they can get private grants, they can do other kinds of stuff, they can help farmers restore areas, and I've seen amazing work done around the state, eastern and western parts of the state. But it's all about local communities doing it. I mean, that's what they're based on. So I would encourage you to keep doing that. As you find individual issues you want to talk to us about, I will do that. You said we didn't get letters back to you. I'll try to figure out what happened there, because that surprises me.
That threw me, because if we got a letter from you, we would have responded.
We generally respond,
Well, I
so
didn't get a response.
we'll figure out what
Last
happened.
year. It was last year.
Okay.
And when I couldn't get an answer from you, I wrote to Dennis Richmond.
And Dennis is a good friend, so I mean, I understand that, but that shocked me, and I'll just tell you that right off the bat. So,
Well, it was both of you.
and Dave's pretty good about it too. So, actually, better than I am sometimes. So but I will say.
Well, I'm an old-fashioned person. I don't email. I write.
Right.
And
We actually really like that. We get more emails than we can deal with.
It's more personal to me. It's something I can hold in my hand and read much time.
Yeah, and that usually means something to our office too. I'm just going to tell you that emails come in droves. Sometimes they look the same from everybody that sent them, and you wonder how they got together.
I'll write to you again.
But in all candor, particularly this time of year, when you send a letter to the Capitol, we're not there. So it's held and to see whether we show up. And then they forward it back to us here in the district, and there will be a 3-week delay between when you send the letter and we get that letter. On the other hand, emails we get immediately and respond to right away.
Well, it was last year, so you should have.
We should
have had it by now.
Go ahead, Dave. Anything else?
Well, thanks, Arnie. You know, before we get to the whiteboard and then break up and start getting into our small groups, I wanted to really thank, first of all, the people that put this gathering together today. And that's particularly Doug Hunt and Wayne Belmont and the folks from the county. They worked with Arnie's office and my office in getting some state officials here. I think that it was really important to organize a meeting like this. And I particularly want to thank some of you who I know drove a long, long way to be with us and to share your opinions. It's been said a number of times, but it bears repeating. I think there's a great deal of agreement in the room. And the agreement is that we care about our communities, we care about our environment, we care about our kids and our grandkids and about our health, and we care about our water. But we don't always agree on what's the best thing to do in the face of problems, like the sludge that's building up in our treatment plants and what to do with it. And those are some of the questions we're kind of trying to deal with here today. Arnie has been magnificent, by the way. He won't say that himself, but he's provided some real leadership on dealing with everything from funding DEQ to helping fund you when you need to replace or supplant your own septic tank. I had a couple of real quick questions. I want to ask Casey. Where'd Casey go? Yeah, keep moving around. You said we're testing on 91 different measures. In a case where we're dealing with biosolids, do we need to add more measures? Are there other things we should be testing on that we're not testing on now?
There's lots of other things out there. The 91 number comes from the federal EPA Safe Drinking Water Act. So they have a very long process to add a new contaminant. But like what Oregon just did with cyanotoxins, we made our own rule specific to just Oregon's regional problem. I mean, cyanobacteria is not just Oregon's problem. We took it upon us to make emergency rules, and now we're creating permanent rules.
Well, I got the short answer. Yeah, we need to be looking on some other things as well. So we'll talk about that. I wanted to ask Andrew. Where did Andrew go? Andrew, we've been talking about solids all day long. We've got a greater bulk of liquid. Is bioliquid something we need to be concerned about?
In my opinion, no. We're treating beyond 98% capacity. That's the water treatment for solids at the low we can get from filters.
All right.
Water side is a little easier.
You think this is, Kayleen, you think we need to be worried about
That would be
bioliquids?
my husband, but I.
Yeah, we
I'm
do.
sorry.
Yeah, we do. And, you know, we really need to be worried about these microscopic plastics. You know, the EPA blocked them from letting it, in May, there's going to let out a study on it. And the EPA and the White House blocked the study because they're afraid it would cause basically a public relations nightmare.
Okay, I apologize for interrupting, but I got your short answer is, yeah, we need to
oceans are full of it.
Yeah, and so's our water.
Yeah.
It's also in all our blood systems, according to the EPA. Everybody here, it's in our blood system from our drinking water. And that is a fact. You can look it up through the EPA.
All right, I'm going to ask one last question. Jerry, on your fields, if you're not fertilizing with biosolids, you're going to be fertilizing with something else next to the river?
Chemical fertilizer, some.
Yeah, all right. Well, I'm just trying to raise a couple of different questions and get a little bit of sense of where we go from here. You look like you got a question for me.
I have an answer. I saw on a garden show that I watched on TV called Garden Time, that in Hillsborough, they have a site that you can go to which is called crystalgreen.com.
Yes.
They took their biosolids and dried it like they do for the landfills, but instead they made them time-release pellets, sacked them up, and sell them in garden shops as time-release fertilizers in small quantities. And they're making money on it, and they're paying for their own plants.
Interesting.
Some of our cattle, Eastern Oregon, the huge big cattle deals, right, we're doing some of the same stuff, but even before that, but it is an issue. I can spread it out more.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I would say, Commissioner Holm, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just briefly, Commissioner Hunt had to leave as vice chair of the board. I think on Commissioner Thompson's behalf, you know, this is an issue of great concern to all of us. Commissioner Thompson was one of the authors of the legislation back in the 1990s that created our watershed councils, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed in myself because at the time we created watershed councils, we did not get the information given to us of sludge, I won't use the word biosolids, that it was being spread this way, and I think something changed. That was in 1995 when we started that, and the general information wasn't there. So thanks to the people that came to this meeting and brought things to us to our meetings, commissioners' meetings, and bringing this forward, you guys did a great job with it. Thank you.
Yeah. I want to thank everybody as well, our panelists, our concerned citizens who have stepped forward on this. I think today was the beginning, only the beginning of a dialogue toward getting answers we need, toward possible solutions. In addition to people who've already been thanked, I want to thank Jamie for doing an outstanding job as moderator. Wayne Belmont, it was mentioned, he's got a document of potential next steps he's developed. We won't have time to go through that in detail, but we will get it on the county's website so people can look at it and provide feedback for that. Also, I want to acknowledge, standing in the very back by that back door, Casey Miller, our public information officer. Getting the word out about these activities, so thank you, Casey. Thank you.
So we're going to be here. Don't let this be the end of the conversation. Let it be a continuing conversation. Let's turn things back over to Jamie and we'll wrap up.
And you are very fortunate because Jamie is one of the best facilitators in the state. I've known Jamie for a while.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
So a representative said that we were going to break into small groups. That's not the meeting that we had planned, but it sounds nice. But we're not going to be informally, exactly. We're not going to be doing that today. So I think it would be helpful before we leave. You know, I've written some things of what we've heard today from all of the different folks who've spoken. So testing for greater number of toxins, plastics, pharmaceuticals, increased testing, timing and sites, funding for regulatory staff, more county local control, permits that are out of date, cost of changing systems with the municipalities. If you were to look at a regional, there's different costs and different systems associated with that. Economic impacts for producers are real and something that needs to be looked at. Need to find out what is happening on our river and in the entire bay in real time. Review legal parameters, the trucking and movement of materials. Several people brought up that. The rate of application, and impact on wildlife and possible testing there. This is just a thumbnail of some of the things that we heard. This meeting has been recorded, so we have a very good, accurate record. And I wanted to make sure that we heard a little bit about what some of the next steps were, because, we don't want to just have this be an airing of concerns and questions and information and not know kind of what we would be doing next.
And first, let me apologize. Lincoln City's been very gracious to give us this room today. They have a planning commission meeting come up here. They got to prep it and get everything out of here. So we've got very little time. And I really hoped we'd have more time to talk about the possible next steps. Because again, this is just the beginning. This is just our initial discussion. But what I've done is just identified what I've been hearing too, and I've been hearing for a number of months, as possible next steps. I'm going to call some things immediate action steps we can take now, without any changes in the law, without any changes in anything. These are some things we could do immediately. And then I'll talk about some of the longer term steps we might do. So immediate things. Let's talk about permitting compliance and enforcement with DEQ and the operators. These are the things we've been hearing a lot about in here. DEQ has just created a Mid-Coast Biosolids webpage, and it's listed on our webpage at Lincoln County. If you go to Google Lincoln County, Oregon, there's a biosolids link there, and to there we can link onto the DEQ's page.
Casey's got it right up here.
Okay, great. And that's, get out of the light here.
Yeah, it's hard to stand.
And that is, I think, just in response to the issues that we've been raising here to try and gather the information. I would say the DEQ needs to review all the county permits to ensure they are current. There's a lot of questions that are coming up. We're having some issues in terms of trying to find all the information. Renee?
Yeah, I wanted to comment on that because I did drop the ball with Ms. Davis and getting back to her on the status of that. So we did do a review of all of our, we call them site authorizations, site-specific authorizations. Paul goes out and consider the site. And he did do that again, what was that, end of July, end of July. So he has gone out to all the sites, and he is drafting up new authorizations for the old ones. And we're hoping to have those out on public notice end of August, beginning of September. So that would be something that we do public notice to save our selects, really for the watershed, the various.
And the county can assist on that. We're going to keep information up on our website, but we would love to, any additional information. If you've got testing results, anything like that that relates to any of the land application, any of the permit requirements there, we'd like to make sure we have a link.
We did actually also set up our own website for the Mid-Coast Basin.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah,
and
so
the link
that
is
one
there.
Yeah, and so that one will keep updated as well with the, whatever additional information that we get from our communities.
Right.
But yeah, I totally agree with Ms. Davis that those authorizations were old. They were so old. We don't do what we do there anymore. We are having a public hearing tomorrow evening for the City of Depot Bay's actual National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit renewal. And that site authorization that's in that package is more typical of what we do today. So a lot more setbacks and reassurances of when they do land application. So that's, I think, a more typical way that we do site authorization. So that's what you'll be seeing towards the end of August, beginning of September.
Along those lines, and we've heard a lot about the application, the process here, whether you argue that the standards and the conditions are appropriate or not. There's a lot of question about enforcement. We understand that Paul has a huge area to cover. And I was really glad to hear Senator Rowland and Representative Gomberg talk about DEQ funding, because they need to have adequate funding to do this. And that's something that we will support as a county too. In the interim, as an immediate action, we would ask the operators, each of the operators in the county, to voluntarily provide the county with advance notification when you're going to do a land application, when it will take place and where. So the county representatives, we have sanitarians on our own staff, we have people that will bring up to date with the requirements for these things, can monitor those activities. We can go out and observe the land application as it takes place. We can be the eyes and ears of the community here to make sure that what is done in accordance with law. That's something we don't need to change in law. That's something we can commit to doing, and we will commit to doing that. Third thing is, we have heard a lot, what wasn't mentioned as much today, about the land application that occurs very close to water sources. And we know there's some regulations in there that have certain setbacks from that. We would ask that landowners and operators voluntarily agree with us to increase those setbacks, something you can do on your own. Actually move it away from water sources. And we can talk about what that distance might be. It might be 100 feet, might be 200 feet. But there's plenty of land out there in which to make this application without getting close to water sources. And that's something we could do on a voluntary basis. And then we would ask that operators continue, and I really appreciate Andrew and the group of operators here. I know they meet on a regular basis and talk about their practices. And they've been talking about things they can do together to improve their operations. But we hope that the operators would agree to further discussion of water testing and monitoring programs near land application sites under protocols that we can develop all together. So we've got that information that's provided to everybody. Doesn't seem to be there right now. Second thing is testing itself. The county is committing funds right now, and we're also applying for a grant from the state to develop a well testing pilot project here in Lincoln County. It hasn't been done before. The initial testing will prioritize community wells, community systems, wells near land application areas, and wells serving low and moderate income families. We don't know how many tests we're going to be able to do on an annual basis, but we're going to commit a matching amount to the amount of money we get from the states to begin a well testing program here in Lincoln County. And then we ask that we continue, the operators and the community continue to discuss alternatives to land application. And that includes the landfilling option. I know that's not a preferred option necessarily, but it does seem to protect the Sludge Valley better. And that we look again at any kind of shared treatment facilities and options out there. We've heard some discussion about that, but I think there's more that needs to be done. That's the near term. Long term, we think that we should explore changes to state laws that empower local governments to apply stricter land use standards and enforce existing standards. Right now, we are preempted from regulation on a local level. I know I've had some discussions with folks about that, but as an attorney, I've looked at that very carefully, and we are preempted. Local governments really don't have, at least in the land use side of things, counties don't have the ability to regulate this at all, and I think that should change. There should be some ability for local governments to do additional regulations and or enforce the existing standards. Give us a role in that activity so we can engage it. Second thing would be to review current EPA and DEQ standards for land application against changes that are occurring in other areas of the United States. In our research, we recently ran across a major change in a it's called Treasure Coast. Florida. The Treasure Coast in Florida, in which a number of municipalities and counties came together and basically requested that the state ban the application of biosolids. This is areas around the Everglades and some of the areas there that I think increased concerns. They have pulled together a number of scientists and technology experts there to look at alternatives to land application and are doing so. And they are looking at the standards in which they're operating. This is not an issue that's endemic just to Lincoln County. It's happening across the United States. And it may be time that we need to look at that, at our standards now, of what we're doing and how we're applying this. Most important, I think, thing coming out of this, biosolids, I think we recognize biosolids is just one of the issues we need to look at the overall health and quality of the water in the Sludge River watershed. So we would propose, we know there's some studies that have been done. For instance, there's a study on TMDLs done as a result of litigation, settlement of some litigation, that looked at, and we talked a little bit about TMDLs, that looked at non-point source pollution issues. And it's been spread. It's been going on for a number of years, and the standard indicated there's a lot of baseline studies on certain areas, but there's nothing comprehensive, multifaceted. So we would propose that the county collaborate with the state, and thank you again, Senator Roebland, for offering up state money, the Sludge Tribe, the cities, and communities and stakeholders to look at, and the others that use the Sludge River water, and look at funding a comprehensive, multifaceted water testing program beyond what is currently undertaken. We need to find out what's going on in our watershed. The focus should be on water quality near historical. It can include focus on water quality near land application sites or areas of the watershed exhibiting poor water quality conditions or symptoms. And these testing protocols needs to be science-based. We need to come together as a community and figure out what it is we're looking at and where we're testing. And we can use the baseline studies we've got already for doing it. I think this is the key outcome of this particular process, and we're ready to support that particular effort. We need to look at alternatives to land application. We're talking about the possibility of countywide or regional facilities. I know there's some discussion through our own Council of Governments, the COG, is actually looking at a couple of ideas related to biosolids as part of actually solid waste and biosolids. Some options in that particular area, which would be on a regional basis. And we need to explore alternative treatment technologies. And so towards that end, we'd be willing to form some work groups with appropriate people. We've identified some. I'm not going to go over those right now, but we'll put those on the website to pull people together to take some of these next steps. So again, this is the beginning, but we hope to go beyond here.
And we were fortunate to have 2 University of Oregon law students come in. And we don't have all the time to do all the work we need to do that. You guys stand up. Without them, we wouldn't have been able to accomplish this much. So, thank you. We have a good team here. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, well done.
You're all done.
So Commissioner Hall, I think you tried to close the meeting once, but I did want to give you the final word.
What can be said that hasn't been said, except to anybody who thinks that the voice of one person or a few people can't make a difference? I give you the Davises. I give you everybody who has come together behind them. Thank you all.
It was all of us.
Let's get forward. Willing to fall. So, thank you all.